All right, welcome to APUS History Review. We're going to be talking about Period 6 today in our study of APUS history. Period 6 goes from 1865 to 1898. Of course, 1865, the conclusion of the Civil War. 1898, sometimes used as a point of demarcation with the start of the Spanish-American War, although we're going to talk more about a period of imperial development of the United States in our next period of study, Period 7. Um, Now, of course, in period 5, we were talking about some of the changes that occurred primarily in the South, as we talked about Reconstruction in that same time period, 1865, 1877, although some would say Reconstruction started even in the midst of the Civil War. But again, focusing primarily in the South in that time period. In this period of study, period 6, we're going to be looking more at the West and the Northeast and some of the changes that are going to be occurring in these regions at that same time period. All right? So, one of the critical things that connects these periods will be some of the changes brought about in the United States due to the Civil War. Especially, we'll be talking about some of the changes in business at this time period. In the midst of the Civil War, of course, the Union Army would require a large amount of supplies, whether that be uniforms or boots or weaponry. And of course, they would develop these lucrative contracts, and business people who would get these contracts, obviously to make as much money as possible, would want to produce those goods as quickly and as cheaply as possible, developing some techniques of mass production and expanding their industrial size. And that's going to continue to play a role even after the Civil War, of course. All right? So we're going to see some critical technological developments at this time period. We're certainly going to see technology not only in business and production, but also in communication. We're going to see friendly government policies, primarily following laissez-faire, but when the government does get involved with some policies, they're going to be very favorable towards businesses. So let's talk about some of those government policies. We'd have some key acts passed in the midst of the Civil War. We'd have the Pacific Railway Act, the Homestead Act would certainly be helpful as well. Let's talk about the Pacific Railway Act. Of course, this provided land grants, subsidies for the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad, this additional support for the production of this key piece of infrastructure not only would benefit the railroad, but of course it would eventually benefit in the transport of goods to the west, which would help manufacturing interests in the east, and of course acquiring some of these silver, gold, and other mineral resources that we would acquire in the west, and of course later on spurring other businesses like the cattle industry. Of course, once you have the railroads there, they can start to transport that beef to some of the eastern cities for the workforce that is expanding during this period, which also will have some urbanization. Not only that, but of course we'll see the government oftentimes developing protective tariffs. This certainly protecting American businesses from foreign competition, allowing them to expand, and even maintaining many of those tariffs when some of the key American industries are arguably the leaders of the world in those industries and still may not need those same level of protections. But again, we're seeing a very friendly business climate, and that laissez-faire idea, limited regulation, also allowing for fast business growth if you don't have to have a minimum wage or certain safety standards for your workers. Right? So, not only with the railroad being developed would you obviously have better transportation, but with communication. Almost always we would see next to a railroad line the construction of a telegraph line as well. This obviously would aid your business in growing on a national scale if it can now communicate so quickly regardless of where it is in the United States. And that certainly is something else that would be part of that Pacific Railway Act, would be that idea of laying down telegraph lines as well. Now, new technologies. There would be many, so many, I'm not going to give an exhaustive list here, but some examples. We'll see the Bessemer process certainly is going to be a key development at this time period, a way to produce steel more quickly, more cheaply than it had been produced in the past. That, of course, is going to spur a number of industries, whether you're thinking about the erecting of skyscrapers or the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge or the laying of steel rail lines that are going to last longer. Many businesses will benefit from this development of a cheaper steel. And certainly Andrew Carnegie is going to make good use of this process as well. But we can think of other things, all right? People like Gustavus Swift start to introduce refrigerated meat packing, again, bringing food to eastern cities. You could think of Thomas Edison, the Wizard of Menlo Park there, expanding both entertainment in some ways, expanding the use of electricity, and you'll have some competition in doing that. But again, this will spur other developments at this time period. The telegraph, of course, is going to be leading communication, but we'll see the development of the telephone as well. All right, so these are all key types of technological innovations that are going to spur business development. All right, you can kind of think like the internet today leads to all other businesses, many other businesses developing from that. Same thing with many of the innovations at this time period as well. Now, in terms of new business organizations, corporations have been around for some time, but they certainly are going to be expanding in size, expanding in their power in this time period. One of the key trends we'll see in business at this time period is the idea of consolidation, all right? Avoiding competition, because of course if you have competition, you need to either lower your prices or do research to improve your products, but if you eliminate your competition, if you have this goal of expanding, consolidating, forming a monopoly where you don't have competition, certainly that gives you a great deal of control. So, to avoid competition, what are businesses going to do? How are they going to be successful in a given field? Well, we could think of people like John D. Rockefeller, of course, in the formation of the Standard Oil Trust. All right, this trust would be a new type of business development at this time, where you're going to find your competitors and give them an opportunity to buy in, you might say, or really to sell themselves to your business. And instead of giving them money, you give them stock in the Standard Oil Company. Their refineries are absorbed into that Standard Oil Trust, and thereby you're eliminating that smaller competition. And as you expand your business, you'll come to dominate whatever field you're in. For example, John D. Rockefeller in the refining of oil. He'll come to control over 90% of that. All right. Not only that, pardon me, but we'll see other techniques like vertical consolidation. All right. Andrew Carnegie, known for the use of this technique. Vertical consolidation, sometimes referred to as vertical integration. Same thing. Don't freak out if you see a different word there. Vertical consolidation, vertical integration. You're purchasing every step in production, from raw material to finished product. All right. So let's think of steel. All right. You're practicing vertical consolidation. What do you need for steel? You need iron. Don't get excited. You need coke. That's a form of carbon. All right. So you want those things, as well as your steel refinery, as well as means of transportation. All right, you're going to purchase all those. All right. Previous to that, you had people who owned the coke fields who were trying to make a profit off of you. You had people who own the iron mines trying to make a profit off you. But if you own those steps, no one's trying to make a profit off you. You're able to cut costs. And again, if you're mass producing something, even the cutting cost by pennies is going to, over time, save you large amounts of money. So vertical consolidation will be one of those new business developments. Trusts, and of course, with the trust, what you're oftentimes going to be trying to do is engage in horizontal consolidation or horizontal integration. Again, dominating at least one particular step in that business, like Rockefeller and oil refining. You'll even see people trying to dominate sugar manufacturing at this time period. So we're going to see a large number of trusts form, oftentimes, again, with that overarching purpose of avoiding competition. Just as we'll see railroads, rather than competing with one another at times, they attempt to form pools, agreements between different railroad companies to not compete in given areas or to set a particular price in order to avoid going into a devastating rate war. All right? Now, pardon me, with the growth of these businesses, of course, we're going to see a number of things. Certainly some people are going to achieve great wealth. There's a reason why we sometimes think of this as the Gilded Age, all right, a term coined by Mark Twain. Gilded Age, though, oftentimes brings these pictures to mind of this opulence, this great wealth that some individuals will have, such as Andrew Carnegie or John D. Rockefeller or J.P. Morgan or Cornelius Vanderbilt, just to name a few of these individuals. And what we're going to see is, even though there is this covering of gold, this great wealth, there are going to be people living in extreme poverty as well, as we'll see. We'll talk about some tenement living. But in general, there is a rising standard of living. All right, as you see this expansion and the availability of consumer goods, as you see labor-saving devices, many Americans are going to benefit from this industrial growth. And of course, we're going to see the growth of middle-class jobs. If you have a national business, you're going to need attorneys, you're going to need accountants, you're going to need middle management, you're going to need clerical staff, all right? And these things are going to lead to a number of jobs that would be seen as middle-class jobs as we transform into this modern industrial economy at this time. All right? And with this rising standard of living, how are you getting these things? Well, we're going to see new business techniques even in the sale of goods. All right, you're going to see the development of mail order catalogs. Sears Roebuck and Company, one of the more well-known ones. In a Sears catalog, you could buy everything from horseshoes to a house. All right, they literally had everything you could imagine in their catalog. You could order it, and they would transport it to you. All right, something we take for granted. In fact, in some ways, in the cycle, they're on their way out. The rise of the department store. That was a brand new phenomenon. This idea of having all of these different goods contained under one roof, all these different departments in a store. Department stores, you can think of Macy's, for example, will rise at this time period, again, providing those consumer goods to the American public. All right, so that's going to be one of those key changes, but also evidence of some of the development of a more middle-class culture, that you can acquire these, what might be seen as luxuries to people at this time period, that to a large extent we'd consider them necessities these days. All right? So those are some of the key business developments that we'll see in this time period. This is just part one. I'm going to be making some more parts as we go through. Thanks for listening. Have a great day and good luck on the exam.